Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this week's episode of The Niche Cast. We are from The Niche Case, theniche-case.com, where you can find paragraphs, words, maybe even a few typos if we're slipping up and we're not in peak form. You might find the odd typo as well, but it's all just a whole lot of writing about Aotearoa sport on our website, theniche-case.com. The Warriors have a couple buys. They've got an NRL buy. They've got a New South Wales Cup buy. So won't be a whole lot of Warriors quoted on today's podcast, but obviously got plenty of stuff to read about if you are a Warriors folk. We've got a fresh Dimitri Sifakula Kiwi-NRL spotlight that is live on the website right now. Also got the reflection on their win over the Bulldogs, which breaks down a whole lot of Warriors things. That is live on the website now. So if you need your Warriors fix, there's plenty to read on our website. Got a Flying Kiwis live now as well, so you can check in with the best Kiwi footballers around the world. We're also going to be talking about the Under-20s Football World Cup today, and you can read about that on our website as part of the preview for that little tournament. So there's plenty of Aotearoa sporting things to read on our website, theniche-case.com. Big up the Patreon whānau. We did get a new Patreon. Shout out Caleb. He joined the Patreon whānau. Big up to him. And we have our extra Patreon podcast there early in the week. And it's just the best way to support all the Niche Case content, regardless of whether you care about that podcast. Patreon's just the best way to support the Niche Case straight up the guts directly. Support the website, support the podcast, support the email newsletter, anything Niche Case. If you want to support it, join the Patreon whānau, patreon.com/our Niche Case. There is an extra podcast there every week as well. And of course, tomorrow's Friday, which means we will be sending out our email newsletter via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. Probably going to drop the regular Kiwi-NRL junior information, any other notes and nuggets. You suck at these teasers, but you got any thoughts for your email newsletter tomorrow, Nico, the wild card?
No, because I'm still working on my dual Wellington Phoenix off-season previews, one for the women's team, one for the men's team, and then the plan is to start thinking about the email after I finish that. So as of yet, no, I we'll see. It's a lucky dip.
There you go. You should sign up because it's a lucky dip of Aotearoa sport for you. That comes out every Monday and Friday evening. Friday, we're dropping a whole lot of information from the week and previewing the weekend sport. I will go deep. How about this? I will go deep into NRL women's signings. Because what do you know? We've had a couple more ladies leaving Super Rugby to join NRLW. Shout out Autumn Rain Stevens-Daly. She's been playing NRLW for a while, and she has signed with the Cowboys. She was playing for the Hurricanes team in Super Rugby earlier this year. And there was another lady. I should have had this prepared, but it just came fresh off the dome because I also suck at these teasers. A player who was playing for the Chiefs Super Rugby team, Shael Robbins-Reti. She is joining the Canberra Raiders in NRLW, and this continues the wave of Wahine leaving rugby union in Aotearoa to play NRLW. Obviously, as let's go with the creator of the Kiwi-NRL takeover. Happy as Larry with all these ladies joining NRLW, and it's just a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing when you just see all these headlines in New Zealand about NRLW as a threat to women's rugby in New Zealand and blah blah. Yeah, no crap. It's the NRL takeover. It's the Kiwi-NRL takeover. Like, it's just happening. And you better catch up or else you'll be left behind. So I'll be writing about that in the email newsletter tomorrow via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. Just a mandatory read if you love Aotearoa sport. And that's all you'll find in those email dispatches is just Aotearoa sport. That's what we're here to do. That's what we love to do. And that's why you subscribe. Let's try a bit of mindfulness. What do you got?
Yeah, one of the old favorites, Ram Dass, quote that says, "Who you think you are will always be frightened of change. but it doesn't make any difference to who you truly are.
That was just an arrow straight through the heart.
That was one of those ones that required the extended pause for breath afterwards.
It's interesting because I'm always trying to get myself first and foremost to boil things down, offer like clear, concise opinions. What's the most important thing that flows on to trying to make sure you do that as well. But when you do your mindfulness, is like the best scenario. Because like if we could just channel that energy in our Kiwi sports corridor, that would be fantastic. Because when you drop a mindfulness like that, it's just crisp, it's clear, and it cuts through me. It cuts through my soul. So can you repeat it one more time?
Who you think you are will always be frightened of change, but it doesn't make any difference to who you truly are.
There we go. Do you have any follow-up thoughts there?
I mean, I think the who we think we are is one of those things that's very influenced by how we think we fit in around other people as well. Like it's one of those things where, very influenced by the ego, by the impressions of other people, by the kind of feelings that we try to, overcome, the anxieties and um, the general negativities. Whereas who you truly are kind of is this just static thing, like it doesn't change. It's the eternal part of us kind of thing, which is I think in many of these mindfulness ideas, a lot of them come back to that same thing, of just like shedding layers to get back to the core part of ourselves as human beings.
Love it. I have been fascinated with some of these Black Caps batting things, and on our might have been the Patreon podcast, we talked about like who are the best Black Caps batters heading into the ODI World Cup. Because Daryl Mitchell scores a lot of runs, and I reckon he's just straight up the second best batter for the Black Caps ahead of the ODI World Cup. Not quite as good as Devon Conway. Because Devon Conway is a big Donny. We've talked a lot about him being a fabulous batter, one of the best batters in the world, straight up. And he is, I think he's taken that top spot with the injury to Kane Williamson. But my question to you, across Devon Conway's 3 or 6 cricketing formats, you go to Cricinfo, there's 6 formats: Test, ODI, T20, International, First Class, List A, T20. All of Devon Conway's batting averages are above what number off the top of your dome?
Of what number? Well, I know for sure they're all above 40. I know this, but I think I might be able to push that a little bit higher up. So I'm gonna gamble a little bit on. I'll go above 41, or at least 42. I think I'll settle with a 43.
That's the correct answer. His lowest.
Hey, there we go.
Devon Conway's lowest batting average is 43.99, which is.
I was really tossing up, chucking that up to 44, but
I would have given you that.
Well, round it up.
Round it up, you get 44. Batting averages for Devon Conway: Test average 50.10, ODI average 45.81, T20 International average 45.7, First Class 47.54, List A 44.5, T20 43.99, and that's the average, which I think at the moment is ranked 4th in the highest T20 batting averages ever. Once again, as per the status quo, shout out to Chris Harris. He's got the highest T20 batting average ever. And that, like, anytime I think, like, whoa, that's a bit of a hot take, like Devon Conway, the best Black Caps batter, best batter in the world, maybe, I just look at those averages and I'm like, no. Devon Conway is an absolute run scoring beast. And we've seen it, like, going back to what he was doing with Wellington. He was the leading run scorer across all 3 formats, one summer, maybe 2 summers, and he was just dominating domestic cricket. Then he goes up to the Black Caps, and his international averages are all over 45. So in a moment of like trying to hold myself accountable to my thoughts and my takes, I do question myself. Is Devon Conway really the Black Caps' best batter heading into this World Cup? Is he really the dude to hang our hat on as the leading batter? I think so. I definitely think so when you look at his stats. And of course, we care zero about the IPL, but he's doing the same thing in the IPL that he does in every other format of cricket, every other tournament, let alone just the test arena. So how are you feeling now just about the Devon Conway being the best batter now that we've zoned in on those stats?
Well, I mean, in the absence of Kane Williamson, it's undeniable, isn't it? I don't even think anyone could argue that he is the key to the batting lineup in at least two, probably three formats, but specifically in the ODI lineup heading into the World Cup, seeing as that's the focus. Like, I mean, I don't know. He just come in immediately and scored runs. Like he was scoring heaps of runs domestically for Wellington. He serves as sort of like eligibility period. Gets straight into the Black Caps at that point. Double hundred on Test debut at Lords. Like he's already got 3 ODI centuries. Hasn't turned up in T20 internationals yet, but I'm looking at this thing and he has a cheeky 99 not out, which, yeah, pretty close. 35 innings and he already had 950s is an insane T20. That's like a 51 in every 4 innings in T20 internationals. That's pretty nuts, especially considering in T20s, a 30 at a decent strike rate is a really effective score. So to have a 51 in every 4 goes is amazing.
Well, just hold on a second there,
the,
because Kane Williamson, T20 internationals, he averages 33.3, and T20 cricket, he averages 31.6. That is really good. That's a really good T20 record. Not as good as Devon Conway, though.
It still falls 10 runs short of what Conway's doing. That's there are a few little things, like if you dig into his test stuff, I know there's a few, like his second innings runs are a lot less than his first innings runs, and there's some of that stuff about whether he was batting at opening or batting at 3 or 4. I think that's all still at this point small sample size stuff. The fact is his overall average is above 50. It's a really, really good batter. And it is kind of interesting now that I think that's starting to be recognized out, like on an international scale now. I think particularly because he's doing it in the IPL. For some reason, a lot of people care a lot more about IPL stuff than Black Caps stuff around the world. But that's definitely something that's getting recognized now. And I have seen a few like conversations and articles about him being like another one of these guys that South Africa's let slip, which I think is a weird one. But I don't know. I still do find that curious though, that because I think from what I understand, like his stats weren't amazing when he was in South Africa. It's not like there was this dude who was this clear, unbelievable talent, but he also wasn't that bad. Like he's made a leap up since he moved to Wellington. But I don't know. It still feels like a weird thing though that there's just this dude that turned up and is like a world class batter now. But I guess it just goes to show, like, you know what? Maybe it's just another example of one of those like Kiwi cricketers figuring out their style, like peaking after the age of 30, kind of thing. Like especially batters. Like it's just another example of you're not washed up as a 24-year-old who hasn't made an international team. You're only just getting started as a professional cricketer at that age. And Devon Conway is probably the best example right now of that in the Black Caps environment.
We also, I missed it on the variety show, which is my bad. But I do want to talk about some combat sports stuff just quickly, because Carlos Ulberg had a win in the UFC on the weekend. He knocked out Ihor Potieria. And so that means for Carlos Ulberg, he's got 4 wins in a row in the light heavyweight division. His most recent victory was like super similar to what Israel Adesanya did against Alex Pereira, where it was just a very precise punch behind the ear, done. Like these aren't. This is city kickboxing precision. This is city kickboxing accuracy at its finest, and yeah, they were both fighters, Ulberg and Adesanya. Their back was to the cage. They were pressed up against the cage a wee bit. A little bit of a shimmy, a little bit of a movement. Swing the hook around. Don't even swing it hard. I made a clip and I said Carlos Ulberg presses the button because that's literally what it looks like. He just kind of taps you behind the ear and you're, falling down. But the interesting thing I thought about after that win for Ulberg is the light heavyweight division isn't very strong in the UFC right now. And it's a bit of a shift because that used to be John Jones's division and he just dominated that division. But there were a lot of really good fighters who challenged John Jones in that era. And compared to now, John Jones might have been the biggest fighter in the UFC and more, I don't know what you say, more important than any of the heavyweight fighters. Whereas now it's gone back to the heavyweight division being more popular and the more entertaining, although it's not as entertaining as the lower divisions like Adesanya's division, Volkanovski's division, and so on. But John Jones I think he's now the heavyweight champion. So he's gone up from the light heavyweight division. There's no one really dominating the light heavyweight division. Carlos Ulberg was outside the top 15 prior to this fight. I think he's going to be top 15 whenever they do update their rankings, if not after his next fight, if he can get another win. And there's every chance that Carlos Ulberg elevates himself to the Adesanya, Kai Kara-France level of city kickboxing fighters where they are entrenched in the upper echelons of that division. Dan Hooker's been around that. He has dropped off a little bit. He's got a fight coming up against Jalen Turner in a month or two. Kai Kara-France has also got a fight coming up. But it's just to say that Carlos Ulberg has a fantastic opportunity to get deep into the light heavyweight rankings. 4 wins in a row. He's won... he won the Contender Series fight, but I don't think that's not really that great. But so he's like basically 4-1 in the UFC, and it's just it's a good celebration of Carlos Ulberg's rise up the UFC rankings. It is balanced out by some of the other city kickboxing UFC fighters. They have struggled, so it's just an interesting time for city kickboxing, which flows into boxing because we do have a boxing bout fight, scrap, 1 ounce, coming up next week, which we will talk a lot more next week with Joseph Parker. You mentioned Hemi Ahio, but he's not fighting, right?
No, I mentioned Hemi Ahio because the guy that Joseph Parker is fighting is Fainga Opalu, who's an Australian heavyweight. Where are we? 15-3 record with 2 draws. Recently, so last October, he fought Hemi Ahio in what was supposed to be a bit of a step up fight for Ahio, and also, he was 19-0 at that point, so it was sort of like this is the steady rise of the next big sort of Kiwi heavyweight type guy. We've had Joseph Parker, Junior Farr was fighting on that same card. And you may recall that didn't go so well for him. He got knocked out by Lucas Brown. Hemi Ahio also lost to what's his name, Fainga Opalu. So I don't think he's fought since that. Let me just check his box rec thing. I can't because I'm not logged in at the moment on my phone. But this is a former opponent of Hemi Ahio, and there are a couple of like Lucas. Opalu's 2 recent losses anyway, have been to the 2 losses he's had within the last 3 years have been against Justice Huni and Lucas Brown, who are the 2 top Australian heavyweight fighters at the moment. So it's a little bit of a sneaky one. It's really not the kind of glamorous kind of bout that Joseph Parker would have been preferring at this stage of his career. I don't think it feels a little bit stay busy, but it also feels like this guy might be a little more dangerous than he needed to take on at this point. But of course, it is a big step up for him to be fighting Joseph Parker as well. There is a lot of weirdness about this fight, though. Like, there's a weirdness about the matchup. there's weirdness about the fact that it's being fought in Australia, the first time that Joseph Parker's ever fought in Australia. It's weird that it is it's at Margaret Court Arena, so at least they've got a decent venue for it. But it's on a Wednesday night in Melbourne, so that itself is weird. It's also Joseph Parker fighting as a free agent, as far as his he's still got the bro Higgins whispering in his ear as his manager, but he doesn't have a promoter at the moment. He had been with Eddie Hearn for a while after leaving the what do you call them, the JUCO fellas, and I'm assuming JUCO might have had a little bit of a hand in organizing this fight as well, because I know they've worked with some of these other fighters. But he, after leaving Eddie Hearn, he went to Boxer, Ben Shalom's one, Boxer spelt with two X's in the middle for some reason. And he was with them for like 2 fights, and nothing really interesting seemed to be happening there. 2 English representations. He's left that now, and they're talking up how much fun it is to be a free agent. Of course, that comes with its own limitations in terms of not having the like negotiating power to book the top fights and whatever. Probably fair to say Parker at times, certainly with Eddie Hearn more so, at least with Boxer, he was like he was, one of their top heavyweight type guys. With Matchroom, it was like, it always felt the priority with Matchroom is just Anthony Joshua, and then at big distance, and then a little bit of guys like Dillian White and whatever. And Parker just never seemed to get the recognition he probably should have, the value he should have in that thing. But that's also part of the thing of him going to the UK. He's not doing that anymore. I assume he's still going to be going over to the UK and hanging out with the Furies and whatnot and doing his training there. And he's still got, Andy Lee as his trainer, so that base won't change, but his representation is no longer English. But it does mean he's in a little bit of this, like, I don't know, he's kind of in limbo in his career a little bit, because he's reached a point where he's still talking about wanting to fight for championships, but we know he's at least 2 or 3 fights away. Whenever he's had one of those gateway fights recently, he's lost it. So it doesn't really suggest that he's going to get back up to that thing, but I don't know, he's getting towards the stage where maybe he is one of those gateway guys. He's still a top 15 heavyweight in the world. He's just not a top 5, and it's hard to imagine how he's going to get to that point. And now he's fighting in Australia on a Wednesday night without representation. It's a strange little pocket for Joseph Parker. It could all change in one sudden press release that he's signed with like Lou DiBella or something like that, or something could change in a hurry with that. But as it stands, or even just a dominating win might change some people's perspective of him. But as it stands, I think it's a strange little pocket for Joseph Parker. It really is.
The NBL. I don't know if you've got any strange little pockets in the NBL off the top of your head.
Oh, I should add one other strange pocket on that thing, which isn't so strange. But David Nika is also fighting on the undercard of that. I forgot to mention.
Well, we can talk about it next week. Don't worry. Unless it's got some really strange stuff.
Well, there is one strangeness to it, is that he's fighting a dude called Louis Masters, who he already fought like 2 or 3 fights ago and absolutely destroyed him. And for some reason, he's fighting him again on this thing. It might just be he was the only guy that picked up the phone. I don't know, but that is strange too.
That's definitely strange. So thank you for saying that. NBL. Are there any strange pockets in the NBL?
It's nothing but strange pockets. I don't know.
Because we do have the Otago Nuggets. They are undefeated, 7-0. We've got the Canterbury Rams. They have 1 loss. They are 6-1. But as we've talked about pretty much every week, at some point, Ty Wynyard's going to leave that team, and be interesting to see if the Canterbury Rams can keep winning without Ty Wynyard. Auckland Tuatara and Franklin Bulls both have 4-3 records. And then you get into teams that have 3 and 4 records outside the top 4. Any update on what Otago's doing to be undefeated?
Not really an update, because it's the same. What do you call it? Like, they've just got really good defense. They've got a couple of guys they can rely on to score them points. I think maybe there was a little bit of a different game in the weekend, because they played the Wellington Saints, who's like, Otago have the best defense by a mile. they were conceding about 75 points per game leading into that. But the Saints, who have a terrible defense, their best bet is to outshoot teams, right? So it ended up being a 103-94 win to the Nuggets, which meant Nuggets gave up like 18, 19 points more than they do on average to the Saints. Again, Saints, one of the better offensive teams, so that makes sense. But they outscored them themselves. And they got 31 points there from Ja'Cory McLaughlin, one of their imports. So I think that maybe is a little bit of a it's certainly not strange. You expect your imports to do good stuff, but maybe a bit of an evolution to the Otago Nuggets formula of showing they can also outgun a team as well as just being able to keep everyone else under 80 points and win that way. They won a little bit of a shootout there.
To your point, they've scored 618 points. Canterbury have scored 665. Tuatara have scored 631. So Otago do have
the
best
Nuggets
defensive...
play the Tuatara this evening as well.
Yeah, and they have the best defensive record of those teams, but they're not scoring as many points. And it'll be is that Tuatara game tonight, Thursday night?
It is, and then like they've just come off that Saints win. After this, they play Tuatara tonight. Then they play Hawke's Bay Hawks next Friday, followed by away to Southland, and then away to Manawatu, and then away to Wellington, and then home to Canterbury. So and then away to Canterbury straight after, and then there's a really tough, but also they're the 7-0 team. Like, it's a tough run of fixtures that they're coming up to, but they are the 7-0 team. They're the ones the other team should be scared of more than anything. So don't expect them to still be undefeated in a month's time at the end of all these games, but I kind of think they're still going to be top because the more we watch this team, the more it just looks like they're the best team. And the Rams are losing Ty Wynyard, as you alluded to. Like, I think he's gone now. I'm pretty sure last week was his last game. That's not ideal for their possibilities of keeping pace with the Otago Nuggets either. So the Nuggets are in a good place. They've got wins on the board already, and they seem to be getting stronger. And there will be some tests over the upcoming weeks, but they're pretty well poised to keep winning games throughout them. And they are defending champs as well. I feel like I underestimated that fact at the start, but particularly in a league where there's often a lot of changeover from season to season, it sort of doesn't necessarily feel like it matters as much. But I think it does. Like, there's a lot of guys. There are a lot of guys who were there last time, and you've still got the same coach, and they're just a good team, man.
I think you remind yourself of that of Otago winning the championship last year every podcast. So good to
the last couple I have, because I'm trying to
that is really embedding in your brain. Hard and fast, who is your most intriguing Kiwi on the Otago team?
Most intriguing. I mean, it feels like it should just come down to Sam Timmins, but
that's fine. Yep, Sam Timmins. Who's your most intriguing Kiwi on the Canterbury Rams now that Ty Wynyard's left?
Now that Ty Wynyard, it might have already been old Wally Brown, but I think maybe the most intriguing thing in light of Wynyard leaving is Max Darling, like what he does specifically. And I mentioned this in the variety show, I think, where he's had a couple nice little scoring games in a row. He's finding a little bit of momentum leading into this window where he's going to probably step up and like prominence because of the absence of Wynyard. Nice momentum for him. He is a guy who was a highly touted prospect, and he sort of the career didn't go up and up and up and up in the way that it was maybe hoped to when he was 18 or 19. So there's a nice little, I mean, you can say the same thing about Ty Wynyard too. So there's a nice little follow on there from Max Darling, just keeping those same footsteps.
Who's your most intriguing Kiwi on the Tuatara?
Well, again, like the dude I mentioned in the variety show, Rob Lowe is, if you take out all the imports in this league, Rob Lowe is the MVP. It's as simple as that.
Who's your most intriguing Kiwi in the Franklin Bulls?
I don't know when Terrell Harrison is meant to come back, so I'm not sure if I should pick him or not. I do feel like he's that is part of the intrigue, I suppose. So
that's fine. Yeah, that's cool. Just don't doubt yourself. You're Tyrell Harrison. So we got Sam Timmins, he's a big man. Max Darling's a big man for Canterbury. Rob Lowe's a big man for Tuatara. Tyrell Harrison's a big man for Franklin Bulls. So
Yeah, a
the
bit of a
four
theme
best
there, isn't it?
teams really have, they all have really good Kiwi big men that you should check in with and enjoy. We've also got the Under-20s Football World Cup. And we've discussed this before. Like, I'm never like, I don't cover like under-19 cricket World Cup teams or World Cups or whatever, mainly because they come around every 2 years, and it's just like to me it's contextual, but what matters most is what you do in the Plunkett Shield and what you do in domestic cricket. I cover a lot of junior rugby league, for example, but again, that is contextual to help set up the Kiwi-NRL wrinkles. The football, you do like to go deep into these junior tournaments, whether it's men's or women's, under 17s, under 20s. And we just flow with how each sport is set up and what is interesting there. People can follow the team's performances through a lot of your work on Twitter. I'm sure it'll be mentioned a lot in the email newsletters. Not sure if you'll do yarns for the website or not, but there are plenty of people can follow your thoughts on how the team's performing, how they're winning, how they're losing, what's going on in the context of the tournament. But right now, before their first game, which is on Saturday, I want to know some names. That's all I'm interested in again. Just give me some names. Give me some intriguing geezers. First, though, are the intriguing geezers who are already entrenched in professional football, which in theory, they are the best dudes. Because you're going to have, I think you've said before, there's a lot of like Wellington Phoenix Academy players. You've got other players from around Aotearoa and overseas. But I imagine the best players in this under-20s team are the players who already have semi-professional or professional gigs right now. Are there any of those dudes in the squad to watch out for? Who are they?
Yeah, there's a few, which is really quite a funky development because it's quite a consistent squad with the team that went through qualifying. And when they went through qualifying, there was only Jay Herdman who had a professional deal, because Jay Herdman is based at the Vancouver Whitecaps Academy, playing for their reserves. Won the Golden Ball, so player of the tournament in the Oceania qualifying. Big yarns there. But since then they've called up a couple guys who maybe were unavailable for that tournament because they were doing professional stuff. But there's also been guys specifically from that squad who have moved overseas and got pro deals in the like interim between qualifying and then playing at the tournament. Just running through the guys who actually have pro deals right now as it stands: Case Sims and Ollie Fay at Ljungskile in Sweden, which is sort of, I think, third tier. They were pushing a little bit for promotion last year, but kind of tailed off. And Sims in particular, I don't expect to be there long term. It's like a stepping stone, but you want to say?
What I'm more interested in is like, what's their role going to be in this team? So, like, focus more on what's their role going to be in the team, what position they play, rather than whatever is happening with their club team. Because whatever position they're in, whatever division, who cares? They're going to be playing for the Kiwi under-20 team. What's their role going to be there? Jay Herdman, what's his position?
Righto. Happy to educate. Jay Herdman is an attacking midfielder.
Cool.
Case Sims will be the starting goalkeeper probably, and backup goalkeeper looks likely to be Henry Gray, who's just signed with Ipswich Town as an 18-year-old.
So both the goalies have professional gigs,
as well as third stringer. Wait, I got to get this right. Albie Kelly Heald. I got to be careful with that because there's Albert and Lucas Kelly Heald. They're twins, but one's a goalkeeper and one's a left-footed centre back / left back, both at the Wellington Phoenix Academy. So they're not professionals yet, but they have a pathway.
So again, Jay Herdman, he's an attacking midfielder, bit of razzle-dazzle, bit of creative flair. We love that. 3 goalies in this squad have professional contracts.
Well, Albie's not professional yet. He's still academy at the Phoenix.
So
but,
2 players have
he's on the, yeah.
That's
is on the pathway.
who else?
Ollie Fay is an attacking midfielder slash
Lovely.
winger. He's not pro. Kyan Donkers at NEC Nijmegen in Netherlands, playing for their academy thing. He's a striker.
Ooh.
He, along with Ollie Collodi, were tied for the top scorers in qualifying. They sort of split duties. It'd be interesting to see if Coach Darren Baisley finds a way to fit them both into a starting lineup or not. Collodi's done a bunch of trial stuff with English clubs, and as it stands, I believe he's at Barnsley doing more trialing stuff. He's been at about 5 different teams since the start of the year. He's just sort of cycling through. There's who else have we got there? Vancouver Whitecaps. Jay Herman's also brought along his buddy Finn Linder, who is a Canadian dual national from the same thing. He's a centre back, and there's someone else here, I'm sure. Yeah, we have Norman Garbutt, so attacking midfielder slash winger slash striker. Norman Garbutt, younger brother of Matthew Garbutt. He is playing under 19s level in Italy as it stands.
Is Matthew Garbutt's in Italy as well?
Matthew Garbutt was in Italy and then moved on loan to NAC Breda in the second tier of Netherlands, and an initial loan deal, which is now going to become, they've confirmed last week, just in the last few days, that's going to become a permanent deal at the end of the season. They're going to buy him outright. They're pushing for promotion, so that they could end up being a top flight Dutch team by within about a month's time.
So that's interesting because we saw Garbutt have an impact on All Whites footy a few months ago, and his younger brother also plays an attacking position. So as a casual football fan, I'm hearing the Garbutt name in an attacking position. I've already seen Matt Garbutt have a funky attacking influence on the All Whites. Now we've got, what's his first name?
Norman
Garbutt. He could add some funk. And that generally, like, you only mentioned one centre back there. Yeah, we do have.
Well, no, you know what? I forgot one as well, because there's all these Wellington Phoenix ones. But of course, Finn Sermon does have a professional deal with the Wellington Phoenix. He's not just academy. So there is another centre back as well. That's like the spine of team at this point. And it's also been touted that I suspect one of the central midfielders in this team might well find themselves on a professional gig with the Wellington Phoenix next year, because they've lost a few midfielders. So someone like Dan Mackay or Finn Conchi might find themselves boosted up into pro ranks in a few months' time, depending on who performs well at this tournament. It might even be a decisive factor.
A centre back and goalie, like, that's the Kiwi football profile. We've got, you mentioned in the Friday show, you mentioned all the under-20s lads who have gone on to play for the All Whites already. A lot of attacking flair, a lot of creative football. A cluster of those professional players you just mentioned earlier are attacking midfielders, they're strikers. That's a key element of Kiwi football that we do love to see.
The changing landscape.
In your opinion, who are some players who you think might put themselves in the shop window and impress and earn a contract? There is that Wellington Phoenix wrinkle, and as you said, like, a couple midfielders have moved on. We've got Giancarlo Italiano as the new coach, so there is some interesting Wellington Phoenix stuff, because this is where these players can perform at a higher level than what they usually do within New Zealand. And that's where I think a lot of Wellington Phoenix fans are going to be watching some of those lads to learn about what they might offer the Wellington Phoenix moving forward. But outside that Wellington Phoenix group, are there any other players who you're watching as, like, this player could earn a contract overseas if they just play to the best of their abilities in the World Cup? Like, who are some of the names that you're going to be tracking from a educational perspective for yourself?
Yeah, there's, just scanning through the squad, there's 3 names that spring to mind looking at the options there. And it's not necessarily the 3 best players or the 3 players that I think are going to be key to this, how this team sets up or anything like that. It's just more a bit situational. I did hear some rumors that Noah Karunaratne might have something lined up in the Netherlands at the end of this tournament. I haven't seen that corroborated, but it's an idea that's floating around, and those things tends to be there tends to be fire where there is smoke. He's one. I think Ollie Kolotti, just even though I already mentioned him doing his trial stuff, obviously that isn't, trials are not a professional deal yet. That's just the potential of a professional deal. If he's trialed with a bunch of teams in England and then he comes and does a big under-20 World Cup, as he's probably going to get the opportunity to do, that goes a long way towards turning something into a permanent, like, name on the dotted line kind of situation. And then the other one is a dude who's already got a professional contract, but Case Sims, who's got the number 1 jersey on the squad list. Expect him to be the starter. He did sit on the bench. He was in the under 23 squad, which was really an under 22 squad. They played China, and they did this thing where they didn't pick a third string goalie for the All Whites, who were playing after them on each occasion. So whichever goalie didn't play for the 22 sat on the bench as the third stringer for the All Whites. So Alex Paulson, who's contending for the Phoenix number 1 spot next season, he did one of them. Case Sims did the other one. So he sat on the bench for an All Whites game. Sort of, more convenient circumstances rather than saying he's the third best goalie around, but he's very good. He also mentioned he's had a year in Sweden playing lower leagues, but in his off season he went and spent. This is more training rather than trials. I think it's a little bit more like having a visit round a rival company for work experience or whatever, rather than actual like lining up a transfer or anything. But he spent some time training with one of the top teams. I think it was Lillestrøm, one of the top teams in Norway. Then he went to England, where he spent a little bit of an extended time with Leicester City. And then also, I think it was Coventry, and then Nottingham Forest. He was at Nottingham Forest just after, for like a week or so, just after Chris Wood had signed there, coincidentally. So he's definitely someone who is playing. He's playing at a level where it's like a young goalkeeper can get senior minutes kind of thing, but also he's playing at a level where I said this phrase earlier, like it's a bit of a stepping stone for him, and he has got some feelers. He has got some some networking been taking place already in his career, and a strong under 20 World Cup certainly gives Case Sims a bit of a boost in terms of whatever that next step might be as a professional footballer. Lovely. Then, of course, you got the Phoenix guys competing for first team spots as well, which there are a few of them, but that's kind of a different story.
A different story, but an equally as interesting story, because as we just said, there are some holes and opportunities in that Wellington Phoenix roster. Let's wiggle into rugby league. As I said at the top of the show, Dana Dimitric Sifakula, Kiwi-NRL Spotlight, got lots of Warriors content there. Both teams have a bye this week, New South Wales Cup and NRL. So I just want to take this opportunity to really dive into Kiwi-NRL matters and see what's happening around the rugby league. It's not a world, it's like section of the world.
Yeah.
But firstly, we have under 21s footy, and I'm really tracking the under 21s in Queensland and New South Wales to see which dudes are moving up from Mal Meninga Cup and SG Ball into under 21s. In Queensland, Mal Meninga Cup is under 18s, and New South Wales SG Ball is under 19s, I believe. I have mentioned a lot the Redcliffe Dolphins because John Whinianganofo and Elijah Rasmussen played in the team that won the Queensland under 18 competition, and they are both in the Redcliffe under 21s team now. Both of them are from Auckland. Rasmussen went to Westlake Boys. Whinianganofo went to Auckland Grammar. And also Sebastian Jack is named at centre this week. He had played fullback a couple weeks ago, and he's like a leftover from the Warriors Redcliffe era, because he went to Redcliffe as part of the Warriors wave, and then he stayed on there. So it's good to see him getting opportunities for the Redcliffe under 21s. We also have the Burleigh Bears. These lads aren't, they haven't moved up from Mal Meninga Cup, but as far as Kiwi-NRL juniors go, the Burleigh Bears backline has Jeremiah Tamepo, who I think is a Manuriwa junior. He's on the wing. You've also got, you'll like this name, Cruz Lasike. He is from Kaitaia, and he is starting centre for Burleigh Bears under 21s. And you've also got Jericho York, who went to Rotorua Boys High School. He's on the wing. They're all kind of new. Lasike and York are new additions to the Kiwi-NRL Burleigh Bears at the moment. TJ Devery's been around for a while. He was a Te Atatu junior. So that's Burleigh Bears always have heaps of Kiwi-NRL juniors, and that's what they're holding down at the moment. Shout out to Hopawati Finau, who's playing. He's starting winger for the Western Clydesdale. He's from Otago Boys High School, first 15. And I think the Western Clydesdales might have a relationship with the Bulldogs. And also we'll say Townsville under 21s. They have Henry Tiatau and Jeremiah Matautia. Tiatau is a Marist junior, I think. Matautia is an Otara Scorpions junior. They are rising through the ranks in the Cowboys system. They played Malmaninga Cup for Townsville last year, and now they're both starting in Townsville's under 21s team. In New South Wales, we have the Newcastle Knights. I think they played the final of SG Ball with a bunch of Kiwi-NRL lads, and now we've got Jerome Falemoy starting at centre. He's from Southern Cross Campus. And Elijah Leomoana is also in their squad this week. Both of them are from Southern Cross Campus. Both of them played SG Ball for the Newcastle Knights. Obviously, Southern Cross Campus is a notable pocket right now because Leka Halasima is still at Southern Cross Campus while playing New South Wales Cup for the Warriors. But Jerome Falemoy is starting at centre alongside Chris Viala, who is a Wairemata junior from Auckland, I believe. He's been entrenched in that Knights system for a couple of years. So you've got a starting centre duo there. So Knights under 21s have 2 Kiwi-NRL centres. Redcliffe under 21s also have 2 Kiwi-NRL centres in their teams named for this week. Roosters have mentioned Benai Iowalu and Cassius Tia. They moved up from SG Ball to under 21s. They're not named this week, but you do have someone everyone needs to be noting down, Tavita Henare Schuster. He's been impressing at centre. Now he's named on the wing for the Sydney Roosters. And Te Huranui Twiddle, I think it's Te Huranui Apanui Twiddle. He is named at fullback for the Parramatta Eels. I believe he was the fullback for Parramatta Eels who won SG Ball. So he's moved up from SG Ball to under 21s. He is named at starting fullback for the Parramatta Eels in under 21s. So as always, lots of interesting Kiwi-NRL stuff happening at the lower levels. In the NRL, we've got the Broncos versus Panthers tonight, Thursday night. Broncos, everything is stock standard there. I do love the Panthers with Fisher Harris and Moses Leota as the starting props. Like, it doesn't get any better than that. And it'll be interesting to see how they perform against a Broncos forward pack that everyone loves, and rightly so. But personally, prefer a bit of Moses Leota and Fisher Harris. And then we've got Dragons versus Roosters. This is a fascinating encounter because the Dragons are operating with an interim coach. A couple of changes to their lineup, but no real major Kiwi-NRL wrinkles there. But the Roosters are a team to spin a little yarn about because there's just a bit of there is a stink coming from the Roosters. But I don't know if it's anything dramatic. Like, it's just a weird stench. You know, you're just wondering where the stench comes from. Basically, who farted. And the Roosters aren't playing their best footy. Which, as I said last week, like they weren't playing their best footy when Joey Manu had been shifted to the halves. And Brandon Smith, everyone was complaining about him at dummy half. I'm just curious as to what happens with the Roosters moving forward. The Roosters, especially, obviously I got my Kiwi-NRL goggles on with all these teams. The Roosters have earned plenty of faith and trust in what they do throughout an NRL season. And I'm just curious, I'm just learning how the Roosters get through this patch. Like, Roosters, they're not a losing team, but they're certainly not their best, and they're not playing their best footy. And unfortunately, that has involved Joey Manu in the halves. Jackson Paulo was really good to start the season. He's been pretty good all season, Northcote Junior. But it's like his opportunities are coming when the Roosters are struggling, which is just interesting. Roosters are struggling when Jared Whitehair-Hargreaves doesn't play. He is basically the man from Rotorua. And we do have Satili Tupouniua Maris Jr. He came back from injury via the bench, which basically saw him play middle forward off the bench. Now he's named at his usual edge forward slot, and that's where he plays his best footy, so that might help the Roosters this season. Are you scared of the Roosters for this game as a Dragons faithful?
Well, the Roosters did beat the Dragons a couple of weeks ago on Anzac Day.
So yes.
I mean, I'm just trying to work out the right way to phrase this answer, because I'm not sure that scared is the right word, because the Dragons have lost. Let me see if they actually say. I'm not sure. At least 5 games in a row, isn't it? I think no, 6 games in a row. There it is. The Dragons have lost 6 games in a row. I'm not scared of them facing anyone, because there's nothing to be frightened for when there's nothing to lose, right? They're just going to get beaten again. Maybe they'll, like, the best case scenario is that the interim coach gets a bit of a tune out of the team and then they play quite well, or at least better than they have been playing, in which case, even if they did lose, who cares? Although I did notice there was some stat where it's like, I think they've lost their last 5 games by a combined 13-point differential. Like, add up the difference that they've lost by, and it only comes to like 13 points, which is the smallest differential in a 5-game losing streak for, I think it was like 95 years or something ridiculous. So they've been in a lot of these games. The Dragons aren't playing terribly. They're just awful at defining moments. And I mean, they're probably just going to lose to the Roosters. It's a good opportunity for the Roosters, some of those dudes, to get back to Roosters ball after getting smoked by the Panthers last week. The Brandon Smith thing is quite interesting, because I don't see people, I nowhere near as tuned in on this as you would be, but it doesn't seem like people are saying, like, people aren't out there being like, this is a bad player, he's playing badly. It's a little bit more about like, this is not a Roosters dummy half. Like, this isn't the kind of guy they're used to in that position, which just feels like, okay, it's a transitional period then. Of course, if you're signing a dummy half who does some things a little bit different to how previous guys have done in that position, obviously they signed him for a reason. They didn't sign him because they thought he would be the same as previous guys. They thought they weren't thinking they were getting, Jake Friend too or anything. It just takes time, and it might be one of those things where it takes at least half a season before that even begins to figure out, before both sides adjust to each other. So I don't know. It feels like the kind of game where the Roosters are going to probably have a bit of fun figuring some of this stuff out and bouncing back to a bit of form, because the Dragons are a ship without a sail at the moment. Also, as the undercurrent thing is that one of the dudes the Dragons are targeting for their next head coach supposedly is old mate Riles, who's a assistant for the Roosters, who don't want to let him go. So there's a wee bit of a niggly thing there.
Yeah, but no one cares about the Dragons, so let's move on. Eels.
You asked the Dragons question.
Yeah, but you're going deep into all these Dragons things. Like, they have no Kiwi-NRL players. It's like,
you mentioned a few of there are a couple in reserve grade, aren't there? And when you're sort of working with a new coach, that can be one of the things that happens, as you boost up a few of the younger guys to, I don't know, get people to care about the club a bit more.
Is
there anyone close?
No.
Not enough? Okay.
Well,
there goes that dream.
Parramatta Eels have a similar vibe to the Roosters, because Dylan Brown, they lost last week. I think it was against the Raiders with Dylan Brown in the halves and no Mitchell Moses. So that was interesting, just following Dylan Brown and his work in the halves. It was a tough week for my Dylan Brown's a better number 6 than Kalen Ponga. Kind of took the L on that one. Kalen Ponga was on fire, so fair play to him. Be interesting to see what he does against a team that can actually defend, unlike the Gold Coast Titans. But also, this weird Eels run has featured a lot of Bailey Simonson at centre. He's plugging a hole, he's doing his job, that's right. But again, it just doesn't fill me with positive vibes. It's also Wiremu Greg, fellow Northlander, as Dylan Brown. He's been starting at prop, and the Eels haven't been playing their best footy. So that's another thing where it's just like, this is interesting. Not the best, but we'll keep learning. And it's good to see the Eels do have Ogden and Makatoa on their bench, which is typically confusing as to what Brad Arthur actually wants to do with those players in his squad, because they are yanked in and out of NRL footy every week. And who knows, maybe that might impact winning footy in the NRL. They face the Rabbitohs, and unlike the Roosters trying to get back on track against the Dragons, the Eels trying to get back on track against the Rabbitohs is a very tough challenge, especially Indigenous round. A lot of fabulous Indigenous players in that Rabbitohs team who will be pretty keen to dominate the Parramatta Eels. So be interesting to see what happens there. But again, the Eels aren't playing their best footy, with a lot of Kiwi-NRL lads getting bigger opportunities. So it would be nice if they could really just rack up some good games. Sharks versus Knights, as we mentioned, Kalen Ponga was on fire last week. This week, I think for the Knights, it's a really interesting game for Leo Thompson, who is he's still in the middle, even though the Knights, they've got Jacob Saifidi back, they've got Adam Elliott back, two forwards who weren't playing a few weeks ago as Leo Thompson got more minutes. But now Leo Thompson is coming up against a pretty hostile, although slightly under-strength Cronulla Sharks team. And the interesting thing about Leo Thompson, in writing about Sifakula this morning, Sifakula and Leo Thompson were first 15 midfielders. Leo Thompson was in the midfield for Napier Boys High School. Sifakula was in the midfield for De La Salle College. Now they are both NRL forwards. And it's just I'm fascinated by the first 15 NRL crossover, because Matthew Tomoko was playing the same position as them in first 15 rugby. But Matthew Tomoko is one of the best centres in the NRL. Leo Thompson's one of the best middle forwards, young Kiwi NRL middle forwards. Sifakula can play edge and middle. And I'm sure if you go deeper, you can find other dudes who played first 15 midfield who are playing every position in the NRL. Some of them will be wingers, some of them will be this, some will be that. So it's just an interesting wrinkle that I found in the in writing about Sifakula is same union position as Leo Thompson, and now the NRL forwards, which tells you all you need to know about what is the prototypical middle forward for the NRL in 2023. Those dudes, they can pass, they can move pretty well. They're not massive, but they're big enough. They're aggressive. They're eager. And Leo Thompson's coming up against Dale Finucane this week. So that'll be fun for Leo Thompson and the Newcastle Knights. Do have, hopefully Braden Hamlin-Uele does get back into NRL footy. He's named in their squad, but he has missed a few weeks. Got Tigers versus Cowboys. Kind of liking the Tigers recently. They're not one of the best teams in the NRL, but as I've said a few times, Stafford, Toa, and Isaiah Papali'i are really good Kiwi NRL players. And Asu Kepaoa continues to plug any hole in the Tigers team. If the Tigers need a centre, Kepaoa comes off the bench to play centre. If the Tigers have no injuries in their team, Kepaoa might play middle forward. If Tigers have an injury to an edge forward, John Bateman or Papali'i, Kepaoa is going to play edge forward. That's just fantastic versatility, and that's exactly what you want in a bench player. So he's not getting that starting role that Stafford Toa is getting, or Isaiah Papali'i, But I like those utility players in the NRL these days because mid-game you can cover any position, and could be a couple of interesting matchups. Because just trying to think, rack my brain. I think Petahiku might be defending a left centre. Stafford Toa plays right centre for the Tigers, so that could be a really interesting Kiwi-NRL matchup. Stafford Toa, Mount Wellington Jr., Petahiku, originally from Gisborne, Manurewa Jr. Otherwise, it's Stafford Toa versus Valentine Holmes, but I think Valentine Holmes is on the right edge. And you might also get Isaiah Papali'i, Te Atatu Jr. coming up against Helam Luki. Everyone loves Helam Luki. Obviously, we love Isaiah Papali'i because he's from Aotearoa, and that would be a fascinating matchup to see. Like anytime these because the Kiwi NRL dudes don't garner a lot of attention from the Australian rugby league fans, but there's these Aussie players who garner a lot of attention from Australian rugby league fans. And whether it's just a quintessential Andrew Webster's better than Cameron Ciraldo, there are a lot of these little matchups where you're like, okay, this dude's like a hype beast in Australia, but he just got dominated by the Kiwi NRL player that no one cares about. And who knows, that might happen for Isaiah Papali'i and Helam Luki, but we'll just see. We'll follow that and we'll keep learning. Redcliffe Dolphins versus Melbourne Storm. Basically got a full-on Dolphins Kiwi NRL crew. Starting front row. Jesse Bromwich, Marshall King, Kenny Bromwich. Love that. Connolly Lemuelu. At centre, I did see it was a Kiwi media outlet. It said cult hero Valence Tafare dropped. He dropped. It's like, well,
one game. Well,
he was filling in, It was just that's how this thing works. But he's not going to be a starting centre for the Redcliffe Dolphins every week when you've got the phenom Ewan Aitken and Brinko Lee as your centre pairing. Also love Jermaine Sako. He's playing career best footy. All the Redcliffe Dolphin Kiwi NRL lads are playing career best footy, which is good to see. Any recent thoughts on what the Dolphins are doing? Like, we talked a lot about them earlier in the season, and they've just kept grinding. We had the Tafare debut, which was good. Have you pondered any other Dolphin stuff?
Well, I mean, they had where are we? 1, 2, 3 wins on the trot to start as the expansion team, and that's always a little bit of a it's always a little bit of a frisky formula to get that right because you've got on one hand you've got the unknown factor. No one quite has an idea of what to expect from an expansion team, but on the other hand, it's like you're also you have nothing to build off of. You have no platform yet. So you seem to see, in the Women's A-League, there's been 2 very good examples of this recently. We had Western United going all the way to the final in their first season because they signed a bunch of veterans, and then you had the Wellington Phoenix winning back-to-back wooden spoons because they'd signed a bunch of sort of young prospect players and were trying to grow into the league. The Dolphins were clearly of the let's get established NRL players. We'll get the most successful coach of all time, a bunch of veterans to lead the way, and should keep them pretty pretty competitive from day one. And they won 3 games in a row. Then they lost to oh damn man, they lost to the Broncos. But then I'm looking at the thing in round 5 they got thrashed by the Dragons, which feels like so long ago. That feels like last season. But you're right. They've just kind of been in the grind. They've had some close ones. They had was it the Titans where they had that sort of miracle comeback, and then they, where are we? The week after that, they lost to Golden Point against the Raiders. It was. There you go. And then good one over the Sharks last week. That just feels like the kind of team that is. I mean, they were built for the grind, weren't they? The way that roster was put together was designed to be a team that can grind through an NRL season, and that just kind of feels like what they're doing. But I have been a little bit surprised they've got a lot of points in them. They did feel a little bit as the kind of grindy thing is maybe they'd be one of them teams that's when winning 16-12 more often than not, but they're putting 30 points on teams fairly regularly, and they're, I don't know, it's just a good solid team that'll make the top 8 and probably won't compete for the title, but will be likely to be playing finals footy.
Epic matchup. Nelson Asafa-Solomona is back in the Melbourne Storm team, so he's coming up against Jesse Bromwich, Kenny Bromwich, and the Storm Dolphins. Enjoying how Jerome Hughes just goes about his work every week as a starting halfback, and I did have Will Warbrick as one of my top 3 Kiwi-NRL youngsters alongside Tomoko and Thompson. He is continuing to develop there with the Storm, which is great to see. Then we got Bulldogs versus Titans. The Bulldogs at the moment are just still Hayes, Perham, and I do say that Andrew Webster, Cameron Ciraldo thing kind of having a giggle, but you look at all the stats, you look at how the teams are performing, the Warriors are just better. I think the Warriors have better juniors. I think the Warriors have a better NRL team. And I've just observing a lot of rugby league discussion, and obviously I make sure I consume a diverse range of voices and thoughts and ideas. Literally everything people say about the Bulldogs, you can say about the Warriors. Whether it's like, oh, the Bulldogs are suffering injuries. Have you checked the Warriors team recently? Oh, the Bulldogs have a really good junior system. Have you seen the Warriors juniors? Like anything, I'd even go as far as saying like negative stuff about the Bulldogs you could say about the Warriors, but the Bulldogs just seem to get this like blind kind of trust or faith or hype that they actually haven't done anything with this season specifically, whereas the Warriors had the opposite. No one was really big up in the Warriors. No one was really excited about the Warriors. Yet the Warriors are just better than the Bulldogs in every way. And we've seen it in 2 games. The Warriors defeated the Bulldogs in 2 games. And I'd put Sifakula up against any of those young Bulldogs forwards. I'd say the Bulldogs don't have a 17-year-old playing New South Wales Cup like Leka Halasima. So it's just an interesting thing to observe. Like when you're watching the Bulldogs, I think they are still, because we talked about this preseason, the Bulldogs are still a fascinating comparison with the Warriors. And to start the season, to check in with that, I took my L's. I took my L's with the Brown versus Ponga stuff recently. I'm feeling pretty good about the Warriors comparison to Bulldogs. Still learning about the Warriors comparison with Broncos, although Shans Nickel-Klokstad barely makes an error. Reece Walsh is top 5 for errors again this season, so we'll keep learning there. Titans just have us like... The Titans are like the anti-Warriors.
That might need some explanation.
What's the one word you've heard so much when anyone's talking about the Warriors?
Resilience!
Do you think the Titans have any resilience?
Well, no, they were the team that gave up a 24-point lead or whatever it was against the Dolphins, weren't they? So, no, that's not a very resilient thing to do.
Yeah, that's my point, right? Do you need any more explanation?
Nope. No, that's mission accomplished.
One more thing with that, Titans are 11th for completion rate. The Warriors are 2nd. So just to back that point up, apart from the resilience wrinkle, the Titans aren't very good defensively. They do have a lot of attacking flair, but they aren't doing what the Warriors are doing, which is, it's a bummer. I do love Kieran Foran. I do love Isaac Liu and their team. But I'm still interested in the Keanu Kinney role in that squad, especially because last week against the Knights, Cruz Leeming, who was the English dummy half, who Keanu Kinney was selected to have to play dummy half, as I've said before, he missed a bunch of tackles, and Keanu Kinney didn't miss any tackles when he played dummy half. And I think Keanu Kinney is better at rugby league than Cruz Leeming, but he still gets selected. So we're just tracking that one. And we've got Raiders versus Sea Eagles. You know how like there was that kind of Isaac Moses era with the Warriors where like one agent, like Stephen Kearney, Adam Blair, Blake Green, all these dudes were under the Isaac Moses clientele. I think Isaac Moses as a player agent, he got banned for a year or so. He's come back, and he was part of, that was around the same time where he also took over the Broncos and the Broncos sucked. Now the Sea Eagles are basically run by that Isaac Moses agency stuff. So like if you see the Sea Eagles are struggling, there's a reason why, because when your NRL team gets taken over by a player agent, you're not going to win many games, and that's from experience with the Warriors. We've seen it with Seabold and the Broncos before, and I just don't like the vibe coming out of the Sea Eagles. I don't like how Morgan Harper doesn't play. Toa Fafoa Sipley should be playing every single week, but he might be injured at the moment. In fact, Christian Tuipulotu has dropped out of their team as well, and there's no Kiwi-NRL player in their team this week. So obviously going to be rooting for the Raiders in that game, because the Raiders have Matthew Tomoko, Jordan Rapana, Joseph Tapane, Ata Mariota's from Manurewa. He's on the bench as well. Ata Mariota has kind of taken the role of Corey Harawira-Naera. Harawira-Naera has dropped out of the top 17 while Mariota has been promoted. So that's interesting. Sebastian Chris, Aotearoa Kiwis player, he is fantastic at fullback. I love Tapane, and somehow like Tapane, like I talked about Tomoko's stats. He went from like 109 meters per game up to 166 meters per game from last season to this season. Tapane is in his second season in a row averaging 160 odd meters per game. And it's just amazing. Like, I think the Aotearoa Kiwis are flush with talent in all areas. Kiwi-NRL, which includes, players available for Samoa and Tonga, even Indigenous Australians like Sebastian Chris, who I think has Torres Strait Islander heritage. The takeover is real because all these players are really good and they play, like, there's depth in every position. But just when you think about like Tapane, Asafa Solomona, Fisher Harris, the Bromwich brothers are now starting props. That's a fun wrinkle as well with the Dolphins. So you've got, off the top of my head, we had Moses Leota and Fisher Harris, Aotearoa Kiwis, starting props together. Dolphins have starting props. The Bromwich brothers. Amazing.
To go with like one of the best fullbacks in the world, genuine like depth in the wide back positions, but also probably one area where the Kiwis have been, they've always had one or two guys, but at the moment they have like 4 or 5 genuine potential international like starting half contenders. And Sean Johnson is borderline form of his career at the moment, wasn't even in the Kiwi squad last year. Like he didn't even make the cut. And now he's pushing back for contention again. It just shows like the depth in that. You mentioned Jerome Hughes, who's got to be one of the most underrated players in the whole competition. Like there's Dylan Brown is amazing. Like this team is Kieran Foran still chopping away. How's the bro at the Bulldogs going? Is he playing still? The fellow who debuted against the
Oluwapu,
Dragons.
Carl Oluwapu, Randwick Jr. from Wellington.
He
is actually named in the halves this week for the Bulldogs. So he's selected ahead of Josh Reynolds, which was kind of always going to be happening. Like, I don't like that stuff where they get too tricky and it's like, Josh Reynolds, you'll start in the halves, but then we'll sub you off and bring Carl Oluwapu, which was what was happening with the Dragons, right? Like Ben Hunt starts in the halves and then you bring Jaden Sullivan off the bench and your whole system changes. At least with the hooker stuff, because a couple of teams are doing it. We've seen the Warriors do it with Freddie Lussick starting at hooker, then Wade Egan comes on after 20 minutes or whatever. You're just replacing one dude in the position. And even with the Warriors, when Dylan Walker enters the field after 20 minutes, he's still playing middle forward, even though he changes the whole way the Warriors attack. But you're just coming on, you're replacing a middle forward. When you do, the Panthers do it with Mitch Kenny starting, and then Sonny Luke comes off the bench to play hooker. That's all good. You just got two dudes who play the same position, one's replacing the other. When you're starting a game with this lineup and then you change the roles of players just to fit in with a bench rotation, I don't think that ever works.
And no, it's a slippery slope, isn't it?
But so at least now Carlo Oluwapu, he's starting number 6. Oluwapu was actually named in a Queensland squad. Might have been Queensland under 19s or under 18s. So that will be interesting. I've got no expectation for Isaiah Katoa or Carlo Oluwapu to play for the Aotearoa Kiwis. Katoa is going to be a starting halfback for Tonga for the rest of his career, because there's not very many halves for Tonga, and he's also a hearty Tongan, so he can do that. That's fine. He's from Wellington. He's Kiwi-NRL from Wellington. He's going to be a starting half for Tonga for the rest of his career. Oluwapu, I'm prepared for him, even though he's a Randwick junior, born and raised in Wellington, I'm prepared for him to be going down the Queensland path. I think he's Samoan, so he could be a Samoan half, but I wouldn't have any expectation that Isaiah Katoa or Carlo Oluwapu will be playing for the Aotearoa Kiwis anytime in their career, which is okay because, as you said, plenty of depth in every position for the Aotearoa Kiwis.
Beauty. Any last words?
Kia kaha, stay beautiful, and we'll be back next week with more podcasts. Big up yourself, love yourself, church.